You think stepping onto a major pay-per-view stage means you're 100% safe? In WWE, sometimes that's the most dangerous place you can be. There are people who walk through the curtain with momentum, the bell still ringing in their ears, and backstage, everything has already flipped. Contract friction, locker room heat, one wrong detail in an angle, or a single impulsive decision can wipe out a whole future overnight. In this episode, we're looking back at the names who entered a pay-per-view night on the rise, but were gone right after. Fast, cold, and shocking. Let's get into it right now. Wrestling Sphere, go! Number 10. Jake Roberts. After WrestleMania 8, Jake, the Snake, Roberts entered 1992 with a strange feeling. He was still the same name that could make a crowd uneasy with a single line, yet he was being treated like an old prop shoved into the corner of the storage room. On the mic, Jake was still deadly. He didn't need to yell. He could just drop words slowly, calmly, and you'd feel a chill crawl up your spine. But in WWE leadership's eyes, he wasn't priority anymore. His spot slid down, his chances got thinner, and every appearance started to feel like he was reminding everyone, "I'm still here." Then an unexpected power vacuum opened up when Pat Patterson was forced out of the head writer role because of a controversy that was later said to be baseless. For Jake, that wasn't just backstage noise, it was a door cracking open. He saw the moment and did something only the Snake would dare. He asked outright if he could have that job. Vince McMahon said, "No." And Jake punched him right in the face. That part one made up, but the feeling of being rejected? That wasn't made up at all. Jake felt brushed aside, like loyalty to Vince's guys mattered more than the real value he still brought. So Jake pulled the rope until it was ready to snap. He threatened not to show up at WrestleMania unless WWE released him from his contract. It sounds extreme, but it's the kind of extreme you reach when you know you're being pushed against a wall. In the end, Vince gave in, let him go, but not with a clean goodbye. Jake had to do the job on a big stage, for a character being built like a nightmare you couldn't escape. Jake's last PPV with the company for years turned him into feed for The Undertaker. A cold farewell. Sure, you can leave, but before you walk out the door, you're getting buried so someone else can rise. Looking back, Jake became one more chapter in Taker's WrestleMania streak. It sounds like a historic honor, but for the guy who had to take that burial, it feels more like a forced, tight-lipped smile. He got buried by a man who was already dead. And that's what hurts the most. Number 9. CM Punk. CM Punk was always the kind of guy the locker room had to watch. Not because he was huge, but because he was sharp. Sharp with his words. Sharp in how he stared straight at what everyone else avoided. Sharp in that very Punk attitude. I don't need you to like me, I just need you to be unable to ignore me. But when you live on a blade, sooner or later you cut your own hand. Especially when you're carrying the crowd's expectations, swallowing things you don't believe in, and forcing your body to run like an overloaded machine. Royal Rumble 2014 was a moment where you could feel something was off, even if the show on screen kept moving like it always did. Punk entered the Rumble like someone who understood the rules of the game, but also like someone who was so worn down he didn't want to play anymore. He still did his part, still hit the right beats at the right time, but that familiar fire wasn't burning the way it used to. The match ended, the PPV ended, and instead of jumping into the next cycle like usual, he vanished. No storyline break to soften the questions. No neatly wrapped injury time off. Just gone, fast and clean, to the point people had to double-check the schedule like they missed a segment. After that, the firing didn't happen with WWE blasting an announcement on TV. It was more like silent scissors. The contract got cut, and Punk was officially no longer with the company. One detail got repeated for years because of how ice-cold it sounded. Punk said the termination notice was delivered on his wedding day. Just hearing that tells you the level of ruthless, and the most brutally WWE kind of ruthless. The irony is, Punk was exactly what WWE always needs. Someone who can talk, can wrestle, and can make things feel real in a world that's gotten very good at performing. But that same real is what made him unable to stomach a system that ran like an assembly line. Royal Rumble 2014 became the breaking point, not because of a bad match, but because a man finally ran out of battery. And this time, he walked out of the frame without leaving a proper goodbye. No ritual, no curtain call, nothing. Number 8. Ken Patera. Some people get labeled strong, like it's a permanent sticker, like even if the world blew into 1,000 pieces, everyone would still remember you as a walking chunk of steel. Ken Patera was that kind of guy. The problem was, by 1988, WWE didn't see him as the human slab of metal anymore. They looked at him like the last page of an old notebook, still worth something, but easy to flip past. After more than a decade hanging on, pushing close to 50, and wearing a brace thanks to a brutal biceps tear, Patera stepped out with a quietly painful feeling. Maybe doing jobs wasn't a phase anymore. Maybe it was his destiny. What stung is that just a year earlier, he'd still been placed in a respectable spot. At Survivor Series, he was on Hulk Hogan's winning team. Then came the babyface turn against his old manager Bobby Heenan, enough of a shift to make the crowd believe Patera still had fire. The peak felt like it was right there, a sold-out Madison Square Garden, tension in the air like a tightened wire, the kind of classic WWE drama that seems built to lead into a satisfying finish. But time doesn't spare anyone, and the people upstairs started clearing the board. Patera got booked to lose again and again to younger names like the Red Rooster and One Man Gang, like the message was simple, thanks. Now step aside. Worse, the commentary team didn't exactly hide the knife either. If you hadn't realized he was past his best, they were happy to spell it out for you, line by line. And then it was over. You'd think a guy who gave the company more than 10 years would get a real send-off, right? Nope. He finished a Survivor Series match, this time on the losing side, and that was it. Released immediately. Fast, clean, cold. A decade of grinding, a few scattered punches at the end, and the door slammed shut. Number 7. Big Cass. The Big Cass and Enzo story is the definition of this. They were flying, then the engine cut out mid-air, loudly. In NXT, they were the kind of seasoning that made the whole show feel hotter. On the main roster, they kept surviving on crowd energy more than win-loss records. They didn't need titles. They didn't need a long streak. They just needed to walk out, crack a couple jokes about height and how you doin', and the arena would roar like someone just handed out candy. A team like that should have stayed intact, at least until WWE got bored of them. Instead, they got split in half. The breakup alone was irritating. The scary part is how much it felt like a warning siren for both careers. Enzo drifted in his own direction. Cass, though, hit the ground hard. And looking back, we probably should have smelled it coming. Money in the Bank 2018, Cass walked out with a huge grin. Sounds harmless, until you remember WWE was trying to build him as a serious, vicious tough guy. That smile didn't read confident. It read like he was tipping the ending, yeah, I know how this movie goes. He was about to face Daniel Bryan, someone way smaller, but also the kind of smaller you never, ever underestimate. And sure enough, Bryan schooled him in the ring. Speed, timing, grit, everything turned Cass into the guy chasing in his own fight. Losing wasn't the issue. The issue was Cass looked like he didn't believe he was in a real battle, and that made the loss look even worse. After that, the collapse came quickly because WWE was already exhausted with the backstage stuff. Rumors like him kicking down a bathroom door on a bus were just one example. One that sounds tiring before you even finish the sentence. And it didn't stop there. Cass also reportedly ignored Vince McMahon's instructions about not putting hands on a little person in an angle. That, I know better than everyone, attitude? In WWE, it usually doesn't end with a happy future. Within 48 hours of the PPV, they told him not to come back. The irony is, it happened right when Cass was supposedly being lined up for a heel run that could have climbed all the way to the near main event level. One wrong step, plus the wrong attitude, and that was it, from high hopes to don't show up again. Number 6. Bart Gunn. After Bart Gunn won Brawl for All, the internet cooked up conspiracy theories that were equal parts dramatic and exhausting. He got punished for knocking out the hand-picked winner Steve Williams. WWE was mad because the ending didn't match the plan, and so on. But here's the problem. Brawl for All was sold as the closest thing to real you could get in a world where most of everything else was worked. So how exactly was WWE supposed to fix it? You can't promote something as legitimate, then turn around and say, hey, legit, but only the way I want it. The logic breaks itself. And looking back, I'd bet Bart asked himself the same question at some point. Win for what? Because the cost of that win didn't hit immediately. It showed up at the cruelest possible moment. WrestleMania 15. That's where Gunn got tossed into a boxing match with Butterbean, a guy who might not have been an A-list TV celebrity, but he made his living in real boxing. Bart, on the other hand, was used to throwing punches at wrestlers in a game where you know the other guy is going down on cue. Put those two worlds in the same ring, and the ending basically writes itself. And it happened exactly like that. The match didn't feel like a challenge. It felt like a quick, clinical disposal. Bart was practically erased in seconds, and everything he'd gained from Brawl for All, the attention, the he won for real shine, the tiny bit of credibility a tag team specialist rarely gets to touch, was wiped out in about 40 cold seconds. Sure, he got paid well for stepping into it. Money doesn't make your face any less red when you've been made to look like a joke in front of millions. After WrestleMania, the aftershock faded, and WWE looked around like, so what do we even do with this guy? A former tag team worker branded as a legit brawler, who also just got publicly flattened. Nobody knew where to place him anymore. And when you don't know how to use someone, the easiest solution is simple. Don't. So Gunn got released. It's hard to believe WWE ever planned to send Bart to the moon. But wrestling is weird like that. The whole chain reaction started because he won a tournament they kept telling everyone was real. Number 5. The Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior reportedly blew up right before SummerSlam 1991. The kind of blow-up where, just hearing the story, you can picture the executive offices wanting to kill the lights and hide. The reason sounds simple. He wasn't happy with what Hulk Hogan got paid at WrestleMania 7, clearly more than him, so Warrior decided to play the ultimate card. He basically issued an ultimatum. He'd disappear to some unknown place until the situation got fixed. Try putting yourself in WWE's shoes. You're gearing up for a major August PPV, everything is moving like an assembly line, and your number 2 draw says, I'm out. Pay me right, then I'll come back. Nobody just swallows that. Vince McMahon responded in the most Vince way possible. He explained that he didn't agree the two men belonged on the same pay tier. In other words, he looked Warrior in the eye and told him, "You're not Hogan." That's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. But the reality was Vince couldn't afford to lose an ace that close to showtime, so he clenched his teeth, agreed, and gave Warrior what he demanded. It was a bitter, dangerous concession, because once you give the Ultimate One an inch, he takes it as proof he deserves a mile. And, predictably, the air afterward wasn't calm at all. Everyone got irritated, suspicious, and every conversation felt like a tug-of-war using steel cable. But this ended up being a very McMahon move, because Vince still had a final play in his pocket. The moment SummerSlam was over, he called Warrior in and told him he was indefinitely suspended, basically fired, and that any agreement from a few weeks earlier was void because of this. A hard door slam, like Vince waited until the PPV was in the rearview before yanking the plug and saying, "We're done. Now go disappear for real." It wasn't until the next WrestleMania that the two sides could get on the same page, and even then it wasn't smooth. People said Warrior looked like a different person, and WWE almost seemed to mold a new version of the Ultimate Warrior. Pro wrestling is weird like that. You can reshape an icon and still get the audience to accept it as the same guy. Number 4. The Cat. Stacy Carter, in general, wasn't the kind of person who stepped into pro wrestling thinking, "I want to be the best worker." At least, in-ring performance didn't seem like the top priority on her list. Throughout 1999, the Cat character was packaged in a very clear direction. She stood out for her looks, her sex appeal, and that feeling of, you're watching someone who knows she's being watched. If that's what she wanted to lean into, fine. The irony is, it fit that era perfectly, because WWE was riding the same wave, image first, technique later. So from the outside, it looked like a perfect match. At least on paper. On camera, the Cat could come off like she was willing to jump into any angle, as long as it kept her at the center of the story. But backstage, the whispers followed her. Not everyone found her easy to work with. And in a company where the schedule is brutal, egos are huge, and everything depends on playing along, it's hard to live peacefully once you get labeled as a headache. As she got pushed more, along with the fact she was married to Jerry, the King Lawler at the time, the story started shifting from favored to acting untouchable. People said Carter began carrying herself like she owned the hallway, and that attitude rubbed a lot of folks the wrong way. What starts as small disagreements with creative can spread into tension with other wrestlers. You don't need one big explosion. Enough repeated friction turns you into the hot spot everyone avoids. Then No Way Out 2001 happened. She was involved in an angle with her husband and Right to Censor, and just a few days after the PPV, management decided they'd had enough, passed the limit, and released her. Just like that, a storyline in motion got sliced clean, evaporating like it never existed. Lawler walked out with her in protest. But by July 2001, after the couple split, the King was back in WWE so fast people could only raise an eyebrow. Like a carrier pigeon, takes one loop around, then lands right back where it knows it belongs. Number 3. Umaga. Looking back at Edward Fatu's life now, it doesn't just feel sad, it feels tragic in the kind of way that makes you wish time could swerve at the last second. If we're being blunt, Umaga sounds like a WWE creation that was kind of shaky right from the foundation. The name, the presentation, the whole reheated Samoan monster vibe that could have easily turned into a caricature. But Fatu walked in and did what very few people can do. He took an idea that could have looked ridiculous and turned it into a fully believable supervillain, a monster so convincing you could drop him into any situation without fear of it falling apart. Need someone to get destroyed to make danger feel real? Call Umaga. Need a wall of flesh to stop CM Punk from cashing in that briefcase? Call Umaga. Need an opponent heavy enough to make a John Cena match feel like it matters? Call Umaga again. And the point is, he didn't just play the role. Whatever they put in his hands, Fatu crushed it, literally and figuratively. The pacing, the stare, the roar, the sense that once he charged forward there were no breaks. Watching him, you instantly bought it. This is a man who could end you in seconds. The feud with Punk is the clearest example. It wasn't a throwaway program. It actually hit. At Judgment Day 2009, Umaga ran through the straight edge image like a storm, forcing the match to move to his rhythm. Then at Extreme Rules, in the Samoan strap match, the tables turned, a finish that fit classic wrestling logic. The monster gets dragged back down to earth so the other guy can have his moment. But here's the strange part. The very next day, Umaga was released, and most fans at the time were left staring blankly because nobody really understood what had happened. Only later did the reason come out. Fatu refused to enter rehab after a second violation of the wellness policy. And the tragedy lands like a brick at the end. About 6 months later, he died from a drug-related heart attack. He was only 36. If you can, go back and watch his matches. Not to glorify anything, just to remember this, Umaga was an underrated talent and a monster built on rare, genuine believability. Number 2. Ryback. Ryback was the kind of character where WWE only had to hit the music and the crowd would finish the sentence, "Feed me more." The roar, the muscle, the bulldozer stride. He didn't need to talk much to look dangerous, because the whole big guy package was designed for one job: walk out, make the air feel heavier, and turn opponents into something that looks like it just got dragged through a grinder. And to be fair, Ryback delivered that role well. Whenever WWE needed a destroyer to create a threat, he was the easiest plug-and-play option. Drop him into almost any feud and it worked. Put him next to almost anyone and the contrast popped. But what's convenient for the company can be exhausting for the person living it. By 2016, Ryback was still a reliable brick of muscle. Only now his spot started to feel more like use him when needed than build him to reach the top. Then Payback 2016 arrived as a weird milestone, not because it was his greatest night, but because it became the last time Ryback walked out under the WWE banner. On the Payback kickoff, Ryback faced Kalisto again for the United States Championship. WWE loves this matchup on paper. Raw power versus speed and movement. Ryback had those moments where you believe one clean hit ends the whole thing. But Kalisto managed the pace, survived the wait, and walked out with the US title still on his shoulder. The show ended, and the story could have easily continued with a simple next step. The monster gets furious, comes back hunting for payback. Only, Ryback wasn't on Raw afterward. The silence came so quickly that fans didn't even know if it was a storyline break or a real-life cut. A few months later, WWE and Ryback officially went their separate ways. No fanfare, no tribute package, just a short notice that told you the chapter was closed. So Payback became the most literal post-PPV consequence possible. You finish the match, you step through the curtain, and the door behind you shuts without you even hearing it. Number 1. Crony K. Quick shout out to that era when WWE loved having a wrestler's name yelled right at the start of their entrance music. Every time, it felt slightly offbeat, like the song hasn't even started breathing yet, and someone's already screaming in your ear from outside the barricade. Crony K had that same vibe. And they weren't alone. X-Pac had that X-Pac that hit like an alarm, and Christian had a name call that I still don't understand why it existed. I know, tiny, pointless details. But man, they stick with you. Back to Crony K. Brian Adams and Brian Clark weren't automatically useless. With the Crony K name, you absolutely could have built them into a rough, cold tag team. We show up, we clean house. At least solid enough to hold a steady spot on the roster. So when they came over from Derby C Dubia, WCW, I had a little hope. Then Unforgiven 2001 happened. That hope evaporated so fast I thought I imagined it. Their match was judged so badly that WWE basically had to ask, why are we keeping these guys? Not just no chemistry, bad. Bad enough that Paul Heyman, sitting at commentary, straight up broke kayfabe to yell at Clark to get into position. And to be crystal clear, at that time, Heyman was supposed to be playing Crony K's biggest supporter in the story. When even the guy selling you on them is shouting instructions like a frustrated director, you know how far off the tracks it went. And it didn't stop there. The two Bryans shared the ring with Kane and The Undertaker, two icons you never want to make feel like they're being turned into a joke. Taker was so furious it felt like he'd been made to look stupid, and Backstage reportedly exploded. He tore into both of them and the officials because what just happened wasn't up to WWE standards. The result was quick and brutal. Adams got sent down to developmental. Clark refused, and that was it, he was gone. And Adams didn't last much longer either. He was out before that year ended. A true PPV aftermath disaster. You don't just lose the match, you lose your place. Which, gone overnight, moment after a big PPV shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe to Wrestling Sphere, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next batch of addictive backstage lists.